so we begin the day with the opening, right? So we get kids registered for the first hour or so. We're saying 7:30, I think, to 8:30 for registration. Is that right? Then we all gather in the main auditorium in Sturm. We have our opening ceremonies, and the opening will include the welcome address by Chris Hill, and then also the keynote speech, which will be Jim Frachet. I don't know how many of you know him, but he's got a really interesting background. He's actually a Colorado Academy parent, so he's a Colorado, person. But his background's in anthropology, and he's done a lot of capacity building work in Afghanistan in particular. And once you guys have at least taken a glance at the CQ too, so that should make some sense that he's being our early keynote. His job basically is to give them some serious advice and strategies for the day when it comes to the CQ, to kind of set the stage for, here are the things you have to think about when you're dealing with a new nation that's trying to start fresh, and how do you set the priorities and that kind of thing. Then there will be 2 rounds of the formal presentations. So every student group presents their formal presentations twice. You guys as judges will go first to one room to watch a presentation, and then we're actually going to move you to another room. This is a little different than last year. Last year we made the teams move, but the teams have a lot of setup. It didn't really make sense, especially for the teams that had major, handmade screens and stuff like that took forever to get up. So we're gonna let them stay in one place, get set up and stay in that room, and we're gonna move the judges. So you will see a total of 2 formal presentations.
How many breakout rooms do you have?
Mauro?
We have a total of about 13 rooms. And so right now we're doing the logistics of and they're classroom size. Most of them are classroom size. So essentially no bigger than this room.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
How is the CQ chosen?
How was the CQ, the topic chosen?
Mm-hmm.
That was actually based on conversations with graduate students about current topics and current countries.
There's different ones?
No, it's just the Yemen ones, just Yemen. Let's stay on the formal presentation for one more moment, just because I don't want to get people too confused. In the formal presentation, you'll see a lot of different topics, because the students can choose from any of the MDGs, of the Millennium Development Goals. And then the idea is to choose something specific within that MDG. So they're not just doing girls' education in Africa, they're looking at a very specific place, a very specific set of problems, and trying to come up with some sort of a solution to it. So these are creative presentations. They're generally 10 to 15 minutes long, usually a team of somewhere between 7 and 12 students. And it can include any combination, audio visual, all students speaking, that kind of thing. Sometimes you may find, and the rubric actually asks that all students be involved. So if you notice that any students are not talking at all, it's an appropriate question to see how they were involved, because sometimes kids who are really just terrified of getting in front of you are the ones who are doing all the editing, for example, of the film, or all the editing of the script, or all the, they could have a major role but not be out there on the stage. So it's important to ask questions like that as you need to. But they're great presentations, and you see a lot of creativity. One of the things that I actually have emphasized more in the formal presentation this year is the concept of solution building, and really coming up with a solid action plan. How do you move forward from these ideas into something solid and that you can actually do even locally? Because that was one of the big concerns, is are the kids walking away from this experience and really getting involved and invested in doing change, or do they just come talk about it one day a year? And we really want to make sure that they're walking out of there with so many ideas that they can't help but start to act on them, if that makes sense. After the formal presentations, then we have the lunchtime period, and then in the afternoon we have the collaborative question sessions. And at that point then the school teams are split up. So each collaborative question room has a mix of kids from different schools, and they're handed this crisis, which is what the Yemen topic is. They're handed this crisis that they have to try to solve or figure out how to handle. Now, in our case, it's really not a crisis, to be honest with you, that's a misnomer. What we're doing is we're asking them to imagine that it's the first day of 2016. Yemen has gone through a successful transition. Let's just be clear, we are not starting any war games in the collaborative question rooms, okay? So the assumption is the transition is over. The people we hopefully want are the ones who are in power. Now, you've got this much money in your budget, and you have this wide range of projects being proposed by the different ministries of your government. How are you going to budget it? What are you going to put where? And obviously they don't have enough money to solve every problem. They don't have enough money to choose every topics or every project, so they have to really have some collaboration and some dialogue. And then the most important thing that happens in the CQ, honestly, is that moment when you start dialogue with them, when they present their ideas and reactions to you, and then you spend some time talking it through with them and explaining it to them. Yeah.
And they also have to tell why.
Why they're
They have to defend their,
Mhm,
that's the
absolutely.
biggest thing.
Absolutely, and that's where your questions, I mean, again, remember that you're dealing with teenagers, and especially if you've got middle school groups, it's not, how you ask the questions is how, it determines how they'll feel about the experience. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind that I think non-teachers kind of forget, that the way you react to them determines how they feel about the experience completely. So if your question is, why would you think that that would work? Or why would you think that that's an important priority? Not going to go over well. That kid's going to go home feeling like crud. But if you can say, tell me a little bit more about why you feel that that's a really important priority to place top, you're going to get a substantive answer, and the student will feel better about their performance. But we do want to dig, you know what I mean? We just want to dig in a way that's friendly and supportive and, teachery, if that makes sense. So, and then after that experience, of course, they go into the final award ceremony. We see usually we're going to be seeing, I guess, the top presentation for middle school and high school. They'll be receiving their awards. And then we have a final speaker as well, which is David Ackerson. He was involved in a lot of the peace and reconciliation trials in Rwanda and in the rebuilding of the Supreme Court. And so he has some things to share, the Supreme Court there, I mean, after all the judges were killed. So he has a lot of really, really interesting background, and I thought what I basically asked him to do was to inspire them to feel empowered to go out and create change as individuals, even if they're 12, right? And make them feel like they've got that power to create change, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
How many judges in each of these rooms?
Theoretically, the goal would be as many as possible, for sure. I would say 2 to 3 in most rooms. Do you think that would be accurate? 2 to 3 in most rooms? And that would
But
be for
we've got to have an odd number, so there's a break the tie.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, so we really do need to have.
So we're looking at 3 to 5 judges per room, and 3 is perfectly fine. Sometimes judges just want to come because they want to get that experience too. Says that answer?
Yeah.
So the CQ, just so I understand,
Mhm.
How many teams are we going to hear?
Two, sorry.
Yes, two.
Sorry, 2, yeah.
There
Two,
are
as
a
with
total
the-
of 23 teams.
Right. Yeah.
So 23 teams with 7 to 10 students. Each of those teams do a formal presentation, and then each of those teams get broken up into another 23
Right,
teams.
so it's
Actually,
exactly
or
the same.
less. I mean, it might be that 23 teams condensed to 15 or
Yeah, if
20
they're small
teams
teams.
for the CQ. So you won't know your team members.
Yeah.
So we'll see two of the formal presentations.
And then 2 of the CQs as well. Yeah, exactly. Which I found a really interesting experience, I will say, last year. I think seeing 2 was, I think, an important part of both experiences, because I